He simply said that the plane was not ready for takeoff, and provoked the wrath of the entire command. What happened next forever changes the perception of who really saves lives in the Army. You ever say something so simple, so plainly true, that it shakes the whole room like you slapped someone's mama? I did, and all I said was this: "Sir, we're out of oil for the engine and the backup line's cracked." That's it. No drama, no attitude. Just the facts, straight like I always gave 'em. And the way Captain Whitmore looked at me, like I'd just insulted the whole U.S. Army, I knew something was off. His face went stiff, jaw tightened, like I'd challenged his authority by... what? Telling him gravity still works? It was August 6th, 1945, the kind of morning that sticks to your skin. Okinawa felt like it was boiling in a steel pot. Planes groaned in the sky overhead. Diesel burned in the air. Sweat soaked through shirts before you even started working. And there I was, sleeves rolled up, lying on my back under the belly of a B-29 that was bigger than any machine we'd worked on before. They called this one Boxcar. I didn't know what they were planning with that plane. Not exactly. We'd heard whispers, new kind of payload, different kind of mission. But those of us in the trenches, wrench-turners, rivet-punchers, grease-stained ghosts of this war, we weren't given details, just timelines, but I could read a machine like some men read palms. And what I saw that morning didn't sit right. Hydraulic fluid pooling under the wing, the oil pressure gauge twitching like a nervous liar, and that smell, burnt rubber with a hint of ozone, that only shows up when something's about to give way. So I told the truth. I looked that captain in the eye, standing there with his clean gloves and clipboard, and I gave it to him straight. "Sir, we need new parts. She's not ready." And he says, "Get this," he says, "then make it ready." That's the kind of answer that tells you he ain't listening. Ain't never turned a bolt in his life, but he's ready to lecture the man who does. He didn't ask what was broken, didn't ask how bad, just pointed at the damn bird like his finger was magic. I wiped my hands on a rag, tried again. "With respect, sir, we're not flying a desk here. You take her up like this. You're gambling with 12 lives and a whole damn mission." He narrowed his eyes. I could see it, that tick behind his temple. He didn't like being questioned, especially not by a black man with engine grease on his jaw. "Are you refusing an order, Sergeant?" That's when I realized this wasn't about the plane. It was about pride, about rank, about who had the right to speak in that hangar. And in his world, that sure as hell wasn't me. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear. I'd faced worse. Artillery near Saipan, strafing runs in the marshals, even cleaned blood out of the cockpit once, humming just to keep my hands from shaking. No, this was different. This was the feeling you get when you know something's coming, but you can't stop it. Like watching a man build a fire next to a fuel tank and being told to hand him the matches. At the mess hall, guys were talking like nothing happened, chewing gray meatloaf, swapping dirty jokes. The usual. I sat at the end of the table, quiet. Across from me was Private Dawson, kid from Pittsburgh, barely 20, skin the color of river clay, fingers always twitching like he was still tuning a radio. He leaned in. "You hear what they're loading on Boxcar tomorrow?" I shook my head. "Something that ain't ever flown before," he said. "Something big, real big. Like end the war big." He grinned, nervous, like he wasn't sure if he should be proud or terrified. "Think it's that new bomb," he whispered. And just like that, my stomach turned. See, We weren't stupid. They treated us like tools, but tools can learn. We heard the scientists' names, heard talk of uranium, plutonium, new math, fire that could level a city block from 30,000 feet. I didn't know the science, but I knew enough to feel cold in my bones. The next morning I walked into the hangar early. Real early. Sun hadn't even cleared the hills. Boxcar sat there, shadowed and silent, like a steel monster waiting to breathe. And guess who's already there? Captain Whitmore, clipboard in hand, clean uniform, looking at me like he'd been expecting me. "Sergeant Carter," he said, voice like frost. "You're relieved of duty for this assignment." I blinked. "Excuse me, sir. You've been reassigned to tool inventory, effective immediately." Tool inventory. After 2 years in the Pacific, 32 engines fixed, 6 emergency landings averted, and God knows how many nights spent hunched over boiling machinery, they stuck me with wrenches and paperwork. Why? Because I spoke up. Because I dared to say that steel breaks, oil leaks, and nobody's immune to physics, not even the U.S. Army Air Forces. I didn't say a word, just nodded, turned around, and walked out. Let me tell you something about humiliation. It ain't loud. It don't slap you in the face. It seeps, slowly, like oil under your boots, like a rot you don't notice until your bones creak. I spent that whole day sorting tools with gloves 2 sizes too big, counting pliers, checking serial numbers, listening to birds I used to fix roar overhead, flown by men who never once turned a wrench. Later, someone told me they had full confidence in Boxcar's readiness, that she was flying out the next morning. Even though I knew she wasn't right. Even though that plane was carrying something that might rewrite history. Even though a mistake up there wouldn't just mean a crash. It'd mean headlines. It'd mean ghosts. That night I walked out past the runway alone, lit a cigarette, watched the horizon shimmer in the dark, and I thought, maybe I should have kept my mouth shut. Maybe that's what they wanted. Quiet compliance, obedience over truth. But then I thought of the kid who'd fly that thing. Some 24-year-old from Indiana, thinking he was invincible, trusting that every bolt was tight, that every line would hold, and I thought, if that plane goes down, it won't be because I was wrong. It'll be because they didn't listen, and they never do, until it's too late. What happened next changed everything, and you don't want to miss how it unfolded. Stick around. Chapter 2 is where it all starts to break wide open. You ever feel like you're standing in front of a moving train, waving your arms, and the engineer just smiles and hits the gas? That was me. The next morning, August 7th, the day after they benched me for telling the truth. I wasn't on duty. Not really. They had me logging socket wrenches and adjusting the air pressure in a room with no windows. Tool control. The Army's polite way of saying, we don't want to court-martial you, but we sure as hell don't want you around. And just when I figured they'd forgotten about me, I got called into the operations trailer. Walked in. Place smelled like stale coffee and ego. Captain Whitmore was there. So was some major I'd never seen before. Shaved head, flat eyes, clipboard like it was an extension of his spine, probably from higher up. You could tell by how nobody in the room blinked until he did. They didn't ask me to sit. Whitmore cleared his throat. We've reviewed your mechanical report on the aircraft in question. He said it like it was a car in a garage, not the same plane they were fueling for something big. The major cut in. Your comments were noted. But technical command has approved the bird for flight. Your input is appreciated, but not required moving forward. Translation? Sit down. Shut up. I looked him in the eye. So we're ignoring a compromised hydraulic line and a cracked secondary oil seal. Again, because it's inconvenient? The Major didn't blink. Didn't even pretend to care. This mission is classified. Strategic priority. That's all you need to know. Strategic priority. I could have laughed right there, not because it was funny, but because it was familiar. I'd heard that same phrase when they shut down the all-black aviation mechanics unit back in '43. Heard it when they refused to arm the Tuskegee pilots with the same gear as the white squadrons. Strategic priority, their favorite way to dress up a bad decision. Am I being punished for reporting what I saw? I asked. Silence. Whitmore looked at the wall. The Major looked through me. You're dismissed, Sergeant Carter. Now, a younger me might have stomped out, made a scene, kicked a toolbox, and shouted to the wind. But I was too old, too tired, and too smart for that. I just walked, straight back out into the heat, the kind of heat that sticks to your lungs. But that day, something was different. Word had gotten out. I don't know how. Maybe someone on the crew talked. Maybe the base radio chatter slipped. But everywhere I went, eyes followed me. Not the usual glances, not the "there goes the black mechanic" kind of look. This was different, curious, careful. That afternoon, as I was walking past the hangars, a young enlisted man from the bomb crew, name was Rowley, I think, pulled me aside. Skinny white kid with nervous hands and a voice that cracked when he whispered, "Sir, Carter, Sergeant, what you said about Boxcar, is it true? About the oil system?" I just looked at him. Didn't answer. Didn't have to. He nodded, swallowed hard, and said, "They told us to double-check everything. Told us to keep our mouths shut, too." Then he was gone. It started piling up after that. First, the base medic showed up at my barracks, said it was a routine health inspection, which nobody had ever done before unless someone lost a limb. He asked about headaches, fatigue, stress, wrote it all down like he was preparing a discharge case. Next, they pulled my buddy Allen, another mechanic from my crew, off his shift. Said his paperwork wasn't up to date. Man had perfect attendance, and they sidelined him like he'd shown up drunk. And then the kicker. That evening, after chow, I was headed back to tool control when I saw them towing Boxcar out toward the east tarmac. New paint, fresh wheels, no ceremony, no noise, just motion, smooth, quiet. Like they wanted it all done without anyone noticing. But I noticed. And you know what I saw? No new serial tags on the replacement parts I'd requested. No sealant rings on the oil lines. They didn't fix a damn thing. They'd cleaned it up, polished it, painted it pretty. But under the hood, it was the same broken, patched-together engine I reported 2 days ago. They weren't interested in safety. They were interested in silence. That night, as I sat on the edge of my cot, staring at the same screwdriver I'd used on that plane for 3 years. That screwdriver had traveled farther than most generals. It had been on boats, islands, airstrips, jungle landings. It knew the sound of mortar fire and the taste of iron-rich sweat. And it was useless now, because the truth didn't matter, not to them. I wasn't angry yet. That came later. At that moment I just felt small, like I was watching a bad decision unfold in slow motion, like I was screaming through a window nobody could hear. Around midnight, someone knocked on the side window of the barracks. I opened it and saw another familiar face. Sergeant Mayfield, senior radar tech, quiet man, smart, wore glasses even though the Army didn't like it. He didn't waste time. "Carter," he said, "you need to see something." We snuck down past the generator building and into a back shed, one of the few spots on base where the light didn't reach. Inside, Mayfield had a radio unit rigged with a monitor line, feeding from the runway control tower. He hit a switch. I heard voices, live voices. "Repeat. Final test signal received. Armament active. Final protocol confirmed for special payload." That was it. Special payload. The way they said it, like it was a package from the post office, like it wasn't the thing that could turn a city into ash. Mayfield looked at me. "They think they're making history," he said, "but you and I both know. If that plane goes down, they'll bury it. No investigation, no questions, just mechanical error." I nodded. "And I'll be the footnote, the tech who failed to report something he already damn well did." He sighed. "You gonna fight this?" I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the flickering signal, that cold, blinking red. A countdown. A clock you couldn't stop. "I ain't letting 'em use my silence as permission," I finally said. The next morning I walked straight into the comms tent and requested an incident log be added to the base maintenance archive. They tried to turn me away, said I wasn't on that mission anymore. I insisted, quoted procedure, regulation. It wasn't about stopping the mission. That train had already left the station, but I wasn't going to let them erase me from the record. You can't stop every fire, but you can damn sure leave a trail of smoke. This is the climax. Everything you've been waiting for. It's right here. Stay tuned to see how the hero turns the table on all of them. You don't want to miss what comes next. What would you do if you were in the pilot's shoes? The story is just beginning, and ahead lies a choice that could determine everything. Write your thoughts in the comments. Should he have just followed orders? Or does everyone have the right to say no, even in war? Subscribe to the channel if stories like this make you think. Here, we're not just talking about war. We're talking about people who remain human in the midst of it. You ever reach a point where you stop asking for permission and just start acting like you already got it? That was me, August 8th, 1945. I woke up before dawn. Not because I was ordered to, not because I had a job to do. I wasn't even on the damn manifest anymore. But my hands wouldn't stay still. Something in my gut told me that if I didn't speak, really speak, then the next time they rolled that plane out, it wouldn't come back. Not all of it, anyway. See, there's a moment in every man's life when the rules stop meaning anything if they go against what you know is right. That moment had arrived, and I wasn't about to tiptoe around it. By 6:30 a.m., I was standing outside Colonel Radcliffe's office. Now, Radcliffe was the kind of man you didn't just walk in on. Career military, square jaw, eyes like cold glass. Said 3 words when 2 would do. He was respected, feared even. But I'd fixed enough of his planes to know he wasn't heartless, just busy being the kind of leader the Army liked. Efficient, detached. His aide looked up at me like I was in the wrong movie. "You have an appointment?" "Nope," I said. "I've got a warning." That got his attention. He opened the door. I stepped in. Radcliffe didn't look up at first, just kept writing. "You're out of uniform, Sergeant Carter." "Yes, sir. I'm also out of patience." That made him stop. He looked up, pen in hand, as if sizing me up for a uniform code violation and a trip to the stockade. But something in my face must have told him I wasn't there to grandstand. "Go on," he said, leaning back. I laid it out. Clean, calm, no theatrics. The failed pressure line, the skipped maintenance, the forced removal from duty, the doctored inspection reports. I didn't accuse, I just described. I told him how I filed a report anyway, how I recorded the incident log, how I spoke to his own radar man. I told him everything. And then I stopped. Silence. Radcliffe stared at the papers in front of him, the kind of stare that says he already knows. Not all of it, maybe, but enough. "You're aware," he said slowly, "that this is a matter far above your clearance level." "Yes, sir." "Then why bring it to me? Because you're the only man on this base who still sees aircraft as machines, not just mission vehicles. And because if that plane goes up and something goes wrong, we both know what kind of report they'll write, and whose name they'll bury at the bottom." He didn't flinch, didn't argue, just leaned forward and asked, "What would you suggest I do, Sergeant?" Now that caught me off guard. You don't walk into a colonel's office expecting to be heard. You expect to be lectured, maybe thrown out. Not asked for a solution. I swallowed hard. "Ground the bird, delay the mission, pull her apart and rebuild what matters. If we're going to fly her, fine. But let's do it honest. Let's not fake the math." He nodded once, then looked back down and said, "I'll take it under advisement," which, in Army terms, means maybe, or maybe not a damn chance. Still, I walked out of there knowing I'd said my piece, but saying your piece doesn't mean you're off the hook. That afternoon, 2 MPs showed up at my bunk with a clipboard. No cuffs, just a friendly escort to temporary reassignment. They stuck me in a logistics tent on the far side of the base, away from the hangars, away from the airstrip, and away from anyone with eyes. I wasn't arrested. I wasn't charged. But I wasn't free either. That tent was hotter than sin. They gave me a desk and a stack of requisition forms to sort. No fan, no phone. Just me and the sound of distant propellers, like a reminder that the world outside was still moving. I sat there for hours, counting bolts, checking stamps, listening. At one point, Mayfield passed by outside, didn't say anything but nodded once, like he knew what this was. Isolation, a soft muzzle. Let him speak once. Just don't let him speak again. They didn't need me locked up. They just needed me gone. Out of sight, out of mind. Then, just after sunset, the door to the tent creaked open. In walked Captain Whitmore. Same neat uniform. Same clipboard. But his face looked different. Tight. Nervous. He didn't sit. "Sergeant," he said, "you've made things complicated." I didn't respond, just stared. "The mission is still scheduled, but your little crusade has rattled some cages." "Good," I said. "Maybe they needed rattling." He sighed. "You're not part of this anymore, Carter. You've done enough damage." That's when I stood. "No, sir, I didn't do anything. I just told the truth. You're the ones trying to pretend it's bad behavior." He didn't yell, didn't threaten, just gave me a cold look. "If anything goes wrong tomorrow, it won't be because of mechanics. It'll be because people like you shook the confidence of this operation." And then he left. Didn't slam the door, didn't say goodbye, just left me in that sweatbox with nothing but paperwork and silence. That night, I didn't sleep. Again, not out of fear this time. No, out of sheer, bone-deep anger. Not because they were ignoring me, but because they knew I was right and decided to push ahead anyway. They'd rather risk a malfunction than admit they rushed it. They'd rather blame the wrenchmen than delay a timeline. And they called that discipline. So I made one last choice. Early morning, while the sky was still dim, I walked out of that tent, crossed the base, and headed straight for the comms tower. Wasn't trying to stop anything. That ship had sailed, but I wanted my name logged. One last time in the tower log. I spoke to the operator. Calm, firm, no nerves. I'm submitting a formal statement for Flight Record Archive. He frowned. You're not cleared. Doesn't matter, I said. You can mark it anonymous if it helps. But this goes in. Period. He hesitated. But he did it. Typed it up. Logged the time, the date. My statement. Flight Boxcar is being launched with unresolved mechanical issues reported and documented on August 6th by technical maintenance staff. It wasn't a protest. It wasn't defiance. It was a line in the sand. Let the world forget me later, but not today. Not while that bird was still on the ground, and that's the part no one tells you about resistance. It ain't always a speech, or a punch, or a grand gesture. Sometimes it's a sentence in a file that refuses to disappear. You can hear a lie long before anyone speaks it. It has a smell, a rhythm, like gears turning in the wrong direction, but no one stopping the engine. That's how the morning of August 9th felt. Quiet, clean, and wrong. I stood behind the maintenance shed, half-shadowed by crates of unused parts, and watched Boxcar taxi onto the runway. She looked different, not fixed, just dressed up. Fresh paint, polished nose cone, like a man who shaves before his own funeral. The ground crew moved around her like ants, fast, focused, but not talking much. That's when you know something's off. When the usual jokes disappear, and even the officers keep their heads low, nobody made eye contact. Not with me, not with each other. Then came the signal, 3 short bursts over the loudspeaker. Final prep complete. They were gonna fly it. Now I didn't expect them to cancel. Let's be clear. But a small part of me, the part that still believed this was a machine and not a symbol, hoped someone up the chain had the guts to say, let's pause. Just for a second. Let's check again. They didn't. The engines fired up with that deep, shaking thunder that rattled your bones if you stood too close. I'd heard that sound hundreds of times, but that morning, it hit different. Too clean, too final. I stepped forward, out from behind the crates, just far enough to see her lift off. The wheels tucked in, the nose tilted skyward. Gone. And in that moment, the silence hit harder than the noise. For the next hour, the base held its breath. Nobody said it out loud, but we were all thinking the same thing. Will she make it? Because no matter how many medals you wear or how many stars are pinned to your shoulders, when something you put in the sky might fall, you don't pace. You freeze. I sat on the edge of the refueling platform, watching the sky like it owed me answers. My palms itched. Not from nerves, from memory. I'd held every bolt on that bird. I'd cleaned oil off her belly. And now she was out there, carrying something no one on this base wanted to name. They called it the package. They never said what it was, but we knew. We all knew. Around noon, word came through. Mission successful, no complications. That's all they said. Just that. Like it was a postcard from a family trip. I didn't buy it. Not because I wanted something to go wrong. God, no. But because no complications doesn't exist in our world, especially not when you're flying something patched up under pressure. That's when I noticed the others looking at me. Not with judgment, not even with blame, with something closer to guilt. See, they'd watched what happened, the demotion, the silence, the threats, and now they were asking themselves a question they'd never speak aloud. What if Carter was right? Later that day, I was back in tool control, my new home, apparently, when Sergeant Mayfield showed up. He didn't knock, just walked in, sat on the opposite side of the table, and tossed me a folded slip of paper. "It's from the tower logs," he said. "Unofficial. You didn't get this from me." I unfolded it. A line of data. Nothing special at first glance, but buried in it, just barely visible, was a transmission delay. A 10-minute blackout between payload release and confirmation. 10 minutes. Now, in most cases, that might mean nothing. Interference, weather, equipment lag, but not this time. Not this flight. Mayfield leaned in. 10 minutes, Carter. Unexplained. No signal. No voice contact. Then suddenly, all clear. Something happened up there, and I don't think they want us to know what. That's when the rumors started. Small things. Whispers. A tech from the radio room said the pilot hesitated before release. A medic claimed one of the aircrew came back shaken, like he'd seen something that didn't match the briefing. You can't prove whispers, but you can feel them. And they were circling me like flies. Not because I started them, but because I was the only one who'd ever said something out loud. 2 days later, Captain Whitmore found me again. This time he didn't look smug. He looked tired. "Command has reviewed your conduct," he said. "They have decided not to pursue disciplinary action." I raised an eyebrow. "That's so. They recognize your intentions were based on maintenance concerns, not insubordination." Now that was rich. I wanted to laugh. Not out loud, just in my chest. Because let's be honest, if that mission had gone sideways, I'd already be on a ship back home in disgrace. But since nothing publicly failed, I was now a man of good intentions. Funny how truth gets sanitized once the danger passes. I didn't thank him, just nodded. He started to walk away, then stopped. "By the way," he said, eyes still forward, "there was an adjustment made to the oil line before takeoff. Quiet order, no documentation, just fixed." And then he left. I sat there for a long time, not angry, not smug, just done. They fixed the damn thing. After the silence, after the logs, after the flight. And they never said a word about it, because they couldn't admit the truth without rewriting their own story, because admitting they changed anything meant admitting something was wrong. And nobody in command ever wants to do that. So I stayed quiet. But I didn't disappear. I kept logging maintenance reports. I kept training younger mechanics. And I made sure that every single one of them knew this. If something ain't right, say it. Loud, early, often, even if it costs you stripes. Because that's the real weight of what we carry. Not the wrenches, not the hours, not even the engines. It's the silence, and who pays for it when it wins. Let me know when to begin Chapter 5. The fallout's not done, and neither is he. This story has one more turn. There's something funny about survival, not the dramatic kind, not dodging bullets or crawling through mud. I'm talking about everyday survival, the kind that happens when you're left behind on purpose and you choose to show up anyway. You keep punching in, you keep fixing what's broken, and you do it all in full view of the people who hoped you'd go quiet. That's where I was by the fall of 45. The war was ending, or at least that's what they were telling us. VJ Day had already passed. Papers waved, horns blasted, folks danced in Times Square. But out on that base, engines still groaned, orders still dropped, planes still flew, and me, I was still in tool control, still invisible, still showing up. They didn't want to promote me, didn't want to discharge me either. I was in limbo, the Army's favorite place to stick folks who made too much sense at the wrong time. But you know what they forgot. Limbo gives you time to build. So I did. I started a board, not a bulletin board, not some stiff formal chart, an honest board. Took an old supply crate lid, nailed it to the wall behind the shed, and started marking every reported issue on every aircraft that passed through the base. Not the official stuff, the real stuff. What the mechanics actually saw, what got patched, what got ignored, name of the plane, name of the tech, date, condition, whether it was resolved or not. Simple, clear, no spin. At first, it was just me. Then Alan added a note, then Dawson, then 2 others. By the end of the week, it looked like a war diary. By the end of the month, it was the most read wall on base, especially by the folks nobody ever asked. Command didn't like it. Didn't tear it down either. That was the tricky part. See, after the whole boxcar business, I had just enough spotlight to be dangerous, but not enough rank to be a threat. If they took it down, someone might ask why. If they left it up, they could pretend it didn't matter. So they left it. Which meant we filled it, every miss, every fix, every near miss that would have been another headline if not for the wrench in someone's hand, or the warning someone finally listened to. The honest board, they started calling it, and I kept it current. Then, one day, I saw a name that stopped me cold. Whitmore, under crew reported emergency altitude controls malfunction during test loop. Possible link to earlier flight path interference. His name, his plane. He wasn't a captain anymore, promoted, then reassigned. Paper said strategic reassessment. Everyone else said quiet boot upstairs. I didn't smile, didn't smirk, just took the chalk, underlined the entry, and moved on. Because it wasn't about him anymore. Couple days later, the young techs from the hangar came to me. Said they wanted a training rotation, but not the Army's. Mine. They didn't want lecture slides or thick manuals. They wanted the stuff that wasn't in the books. What to listen for when an engine sputters. What not to trust on a factory report. How to stand your ground when a lieutenant tells you to fudge the checklist. So we started running drills, in the early mornings before Reveille. Out by the older plains, nobody flew anymore. I taught them what I was never taught, what I learned the hard way. Word got around, and one day, Radcliffe came by. Didn't say much, just stood there, arms folded, watching 5 of us run a mock shutdown drill. When we finished, he walked up and asked one thing. "Is this part of your duty roster?" "No, sir," I said. "It's part of my responsibility." He nodded once and walked off. Didn't stop us. Didn't bless us either. But I knew then I wasn't being erased anymore. They were just hoping I'd write smaller. Too bad. Few weeks later, we got a batch of new recruits, fresh off the boat. Young, wide-eyed, nervous. One of them, short kid from Chicago, name of Riley, asked me straight up, "Is it true what they say, that you tried to stop a mission?" I looked him over, didn't answer right away. Then I said, "I tried to fix something. They tried to ignore it. What happened after, that's history." He nodded, eyes big, respectful. But it wasn't about being a legend. It was about being useful. I handed him a wrench and pointed at the fuel manifold. "Start here. And if it feels wrong, speak up, always. That's the thing nobody tells you about leadership. It ain't in the medals. It ain't in the titles. It's in the space you make for truth, even if it shakes the structure a little. I never got promoted. Never got a plaque. But I got something better. A row of younger hands turning bolts the right way. A wall full of notes no one dared erase. A legacy that didn't need a podium to last. Because in the end, the job ain't just to keep the plane flying. It's to make sure the truth doesn't fall out of the sky along the way. Chapter 6. Ready when you are. Final one. Let's bring this story home, hard and honest. You ever watch your name get scrubbed from a wall like it never meant anything? That happened to me one morning in early 46. Spring had just crept in, the kind you barely notice unless you've been stationed somewhere long enough to remember what cold air feels like. I was walking past the main admin hall on the way to the motor pool when I caught it. A fresh coat of paint, right over the honor roll board. The names of the maintenance teams who'd worked through the longest rotations, the roughest missions, the worst odds. Gone. Covered, like those nights in the hangars, those hours beneath fuselages. Those calls made at the edge of collapse never happened. My name was on that board. So was Allen's. So was Mayfield's. All gone. No memo, no warning, just removed. I stood there for a while. No rage, no drama. Just a low, steady heat in my chest. Because I knew what this was. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't malice. It was the system doing what it always does, polishing its own story, removing friction, smoothing edges. See, the war had ended, and now came the cleanup, and not just of airfields or wreckage. They were cleaning narratives, making the records match the headlines, telling the war the way they wished it had gone. And folks like me, we didn't fit in the brochure. That afternoon I sat outside the barracks with a tin cup of burnt coffee and a notepad in my lap. Nothing fancy, just a list. Not of names, of moments, like the night Private Dawson flagged a failing compressor 5 minutes before takeoff. Like the time we used scrap tubing from a damaged P-38 to keep a B-25 airborne during a supply run. Like the look on the face of the new kid from Georgia when he realized his first engine rebuild held through an entire test flight. Those things weren't in the logs. But they happened, and I wasn't going to let them vanish with a coat of paint. The next day, I walked into the tech office and asked for leave papers. The clerk didn't even look up. "What's the reason for travel, Sergeant?" "Closure," I said. He paused, looked at me like I'd used a word out of place. But he stamped the form. I took a train east. No uniform. Just work boots, a duffel, and a purpose. 3 stops later, I was standing in a small-town library near Indianapolis. Tiny place. Dusty shelves. One old woman behind the counter who reminded me of molasses. Slow but steady. I asked if they had any archive access. Told her I wanted to donate a document for future preservation. She asked if it was family history. I said, "In a way, yes." She smiled, handed me a pen, and showed me the ledger. I wrote it out by hand. 10 pages. Titled it, Field Notes from the Men Who Kept the Air Moving, 1942-1946. No rank, no drama, just stories. Real ones. I included everything they didn't want remembered. The mistakes we caught. The warnings ignored. The small wins that saved big lives. At the bottom of the last page I wrote, "Not everyone who served got remembered. Some of us were just grease and bone and steady hands, but we were there, and we mattered." The librarian filed it in the Indiana Veterans Oral Archive. Local section. Quiet spot. Probably never read by more than 5 people a year. Didn't matter. It existed, and that's all I needed. A month later, back at base, I noticed something. New guys kept asking for me by name. Not for repairs. For advice. How to speak up without losing everything. How to hold your line when the pressure builds. How to serve without disappearing. They didn't care about medals. They wanted truth. So I told it. Unvarnished, direct, human, no hero talk. Just this. The uniform don't make you brave. Your choices do. When my discharge finally came through, they handed me a thank you letter, a certificate with my name spelled wrong, and a smile that didn't reach their eyes. I nodded, tucked the certificate into my bag, left the smile where I found it. I didn't go out with a parade, no speeches, no handshakes from generals. But the night before I left, I walked back to that honest board. Still standing, still full. I chalked one last line at the bottom. If they forget us, it won't be because we stayed silent. Then I set the chalk down, turned, and walked away. Some stories get medals, some get movies. Ours? We get to live in the hands of those who keep fixing what's broken, even when no one's watching. And sometimes that's the longest kind of legacy there is. This story's not about glory. It's about guts. About what it takes to tell the truth. Keep showing up and leave something behind that matters. Even if no one claps when you do.